Managers of Reddit, what was the worst case of I demand to speak to the manager you've experienced? I was a shift leader to GameStop and was the manager on duty with one other associate in the store. We were pretty busy. Both the other employee and I were on registers ringing through our own respective lines. Poor guy I work with gets this soccer mom haircut that I knew was gonna be trouble, and she is trying to return a new game that had the seal broken on it. Against return policy, can't help you point. So lady then gets really upset and demands to cancel all of her son's pre-orders. My guy obliges and is preparing to give her her refund in store credit because her son had only paid for the pre-orders with trades. You can't mix match tenders, so my guy informed her so. That was just it. She was instantly screaming and calling my associate a liar. He literally turns the computer screen towards her and shows her the entries in trade credit, but she isn't having it. Let me speak to your manager. Dude points to me. I wrap up with my customer and we trade registers so he can keep helping out. I ask her how I can help, to which she screams her experience at me. I reiterate what my buddy informed her and that there isn't any way we can get her cash back. She claims, well, I'm gonna call your corporate office and tell them that your policy doesn't apply to me and I've never been treated like this before. To which I happily offer her the corporate number and advise her that telling a corporate customer service line that they believe they are exempt from policy is probably not the best strategy. Gets red in the face and starts looking around the store, and God forbid the poor man, the old manager, walks in. He does not work there anymore, but the woman recognizes him from his time at the store. She begins accusing me of lying to her because she knows that he is the real manager and that he can help her. Nope, dude just trying to shop. She ended up just leaving in a huff. So when I worked at Starbucks, we, as you can imagine, had plenty of shitty entitled people come in expecting the world of employees barely paid above minimum wage who've been awake since 3 AM or earlier. We had people blaming us for the fact that they were late for work and were going to be fired. People blaming us for being late picking up their kids. Kids blaming us for being late to school. Plenty of "but I ordered a venti, why did you give me a grand, or this coffee is cold because I've left it sitting out for an hour, but I want you to make me a new one for free, or you aren't being enthusiastic enough after 8 hours of being here and so sleep deprived you don't know what your name is." But probably the worst / funniest was Libby. Libby was a regular who we really wished wasn't. She was overly demanding and had one of those super complicated half-calf double soy triple whip, hold the cream half the sugar and do a backflip when you serve it to me types, and she could tell if you got her order wrong and would make you remake it until it was right. She also would steal from our tip jar right in front of our faces. She'd pretend to put a 5 in and then pull out 4 ones, but she'd take out 5 or 6 ones instead. And one time during this little switcheroo of hers, she accidentally dropped a $100 bill out of her wallet. The good thing about Libby was that she only came in once or twice a week, but that meant that we were the ones who had to find this $100 for her. She didn't notice it for a few hours afterwards, and when she did, she called in and asked for the manager and asked her if she'd seen it, since she would have dropped it out in the lobby, where we very rarely went since we were so busy in bot. We went out to check but found nothing and told her that a customer must have taken it and that we were sorry, but there was nothing we could do. She flipped her point sheet. That's my rent money. I'm going to be kicked out of my house. Do you want me to be homeless? You hate me and want me to be homeless, you shitty fax. I hate you and you're terrible. Geo, fuck off and die. The supervisor came out and gave me the gist of what she'd said while begging me to find this money. There were also some racist accusations since the neighborhood this Bucks was in was predominantly immigrants, and Libby was your standard white liberal until put under pressure. Anyway, so a week passes and still the money hasn't shown up. Libby calls us each day, multiple times a day, to find out if we've found her money. Sometimes she yells and screams, sometimes she doesn't. Either way, the answer's always the same: we hadn't found her money. So she comes in again and pretends like she hasn't been cussing us out for a week straight, is all happy and bubbly, and jokes about losing the money and how she's just so scatterbrained sometimes, haha. She tries to talk me into giving her free coffee since we lost her money, but I tell her that she has to pay anyway. She grumbles and opens up her wallet, pulls out her card, and out flutters a $100 bill and lands on the counter. We both look at it. She looks into her wallet and after a moment goes, "Oh, that's right. I hid that $100 in my credit card slot for safekeeping, so I wouldn't lose it. You can stop looking for my money now." That was it. No apologies for the abuse throughout the week, the accusations, anything. I know I shouldn't expect one, but damn. I think she realized that she faked up, though, because she didn't show back up for a couple of weeks. TLDR, she thought that we stole her money after she stole our money, later found her money in her wallet, safe and sound. This one is kind of a recurring problem. Fortunately, as a manager, I only have 2 people above me, the general manager and the owner. We have a woman that works for us, is the sweetest woman in the world, but she is a larger woman, older, 65, and comes from a farming and military background, so she is strong and stocky. Unfortunately, she is often mistaken for a transgender person, even though she is not. Not that we have a problem with that either. Anyway, multiple people have refused to do business with her based on her appearance. We do have booking fees at our establishment, and anyone who sets an appointment with her is subject to the cancellation fee if they cancel without notice. I have had her come out to greet clients, and as soon as they see her, say nope and turn around. Without getting into detail, our business has nothing to do with appearance. I then charge them a cancellation fee. Often, I get a call a few days later asking what the charge is. Myself, or my subordinates, say it is for cancelling service without proper notice. At least 4 to 5 times a year I get to hear some asshole try to stammer to me why he should get a refund. I always make them say it, as most of the time they try to dance around the issue. I had a last minute thing come up. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, but your personal life can't affect our business arrangement." She wasn't what I expected. "Oh, in what way?" You know. "No sir, I don't." Well. Cue lots of stammering. Etc. "I will not give refunds for this. My boss won't, and my owner won't. If they really want to push chargebacks against us, they can, but we aren't about to let people do this." 21-year-old female here, 19 at the time this happened. Worked at a popular quick service fast food chain. Was listening to one of my crew members interact with a customer in drive-thru. The customer was asking a lot of questions about prices on meals with/without drinks, but wasn't really listening and asking the same questions over and over. My crew member, I'll admit, definitely had a sassy attitude, but part of the reason I was listening in on them was because she was being so patient with this customer for once. At one point, my crew member accidentally said the wrong price. You know how often you jumble up words when you're speaking off the top of your head. The customer gets quiet, then says, "You know you're bullshitting me, right?" and proceeds to freak out over RDT speaker, asking to speak to me. I take over on the headset and try to explain to her that my crew member accidentally said the wrong word, that her meal without the drink would indeed be cheaper, etc. She wasn't having it. She cuts us off and comes to the window, still going off. She asks me, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And I have zero idea what she means, so I ask her, "What do you mean?" We're obviously idiots, so she says, "I mean, what the hell is wrong with you?" Okay. It basically went on like that for a good 5 minutes. She was just accusing us of pretty much nothing, just yelling that we are liars and bullshitters and the like. I'm absolutely dumbfounded. After people behind her started honking, I think eventually I just gave her the meal for free to get her the heck out of there. Also pretty sure she asked for the corporate number, which I gladly gave her along with my name and our restaurant number. Try explaining whatever the fuck we did to her to corporate. The next customer that comes up to the window immediately goes, "Damn, that beach was crazy. Made the whole thing worth it." I was kind of the assistant manager at the retail store I worked at. We were relatively small and our actual manager bounced between our location and another one, so she wasn't around every day. If she wasn't around, or "Can I see the manager?" questions went to the employee who was there the longest and was acting manager. Most of the time, conflicts were easily resolved and we didn't need to call our actual manager. After a long time employee quit and moved away. I was second in rank under my manager. I was the youngest person working at the store. I had just graduated high school and worked for the store for about a year. All the other employees had only been working for 4 months or less. We had a high turnover rate because mostly college students were hired, and it was the start of summer. It was one of our slow days, so it was just me and my middle-aged coworker working. Let's call her Jen. Jen was 25 plus years my senior, but this was her first retail job and just needed some extra cash on the weekends. We sold high-end products with specific warranties. I was on my break, so it was just Jen on the floor. Our manager was on vacation out of the country, so we could only reach her by Facebook. This angry woman comes in demanding a new pair of high-end sunglasses because the screw came undone on her pair, which made the glasses loose and inevitably popped the lens out. This happened while she was in a parking lot, so when the glass lens fell out, it shattered. Her 1-year warranty was up, so we could only offer her 20% or so off a new pair, or she could contact the manufacturer directly to see if there was a faulty part. We are always told of faulty parts and recalls, so she just didn't tighten her glasses when the screw was loose. She was not happy about her options, so she went off on poor Jen. Angry woman then asked to see the manager, who was me that day. When I came out and asked her what the problem was, she was fuming. She didn't believe that I was the manager. Granted, I do look young and I have a high voice. She called me a bunch of names and started going off on Jen again. She asked if Jen was the actual manager and only said I was to get out of the situation. I kept telling her the options we could offer and she continued to scream. Finally she left, but not after throwing her $300 sunglasses on the ground as she walked out and left. They were definitely beyond repair now, or warranty now. Point after, I Facebook messaged my manager, who was on my side. She told me to clean up the glasses and throw all the parts in the trash. Funniest part is that the manufacturer only allows repairs if all the parts are there when sent in. Without the pair of glasses, she wouldn't even be able to get a replacement lens or screw. I quit after that summer and I never heard a complaint about the incident. I work in the admissions department at a zoo. We work closely with the membership department and are really friendly with each other. When people purchase membership, they get a card that says their name, how many adults, how many children, if they are allowed to bring in guest, etc. Point, the card says clearly that you must show it per card. Sometimes we are friendly or lazy and ask for one ID for the whole group. Point, well, a week ago some guy didn't have his ID. I don't know how he drove to the zoo, since you need a form of ID to drive. We told him that without an ID we can't let him in. The guy got mad and started screaming at us, saying random shit to us. He demanded to see a manager. Good thing our manager, for admission not membership, was on site. She explained to guy that without it we can't let him go in. Showed him on the card where it explains to show it. Point, the guy screams at her, "I'm the no who paid the membership, I should be allowed to go in without it." My manager responded, "No ID, no entry." He asked her to see a manager. Her response was, "I'm the manager." He then asked if there was someone higher than her he can speak to. So she told him, "If you want to do anything you have to speak with membership." Point. So he goes to membership and what they told us is he was being an asshole and screaming that he paid for it and blah blah blah. The manager for membership was called, and because he screamed at him, they deny his entry to the zoo. Oh boy. Never thought I'd get to share this. The worst customer interaction I've ever so much as heard of. Point, I was the manager at the time in a hospitality setting. Point, there were 3 of us on shift. One of my staff, let's call her Steph, had blue hair and piercings. Whilst I was handling the kitchen, cleaning up and cooking stuff, our job emphasized everyone being able to do every task. Her and the other staff member, a B, were serving customers at our front counter when an out-of-state family comes through and places a bunch of orders. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't there to hear it, but shortly after they had arrived, a B came back and told me that a bunch of customers had come through and harassed Steph for her appearance. I headed out front, told Steph to follow me to the back, and after she broke down explaining what happened, I gave her a free, paid break to just take it easy for a bit. I hopped out the front to have a chat with a B about how to handle that situation. Namely, grab me so I can take over the transaction, and how we are going to break down the rest of the ARVO if I decide to send Steph home. It's at this point, Mum spots me having a discussion with her from across the food court and decides to approach us. Mum, it turns out, was the person in this family group responsible for giving my employee sheet. And oh boy, does she have views from 5 feet away. She yells at me that what I'm doing is incredibly disrespectful to all of my customers, so loud that the 100 other patrons of the food court stop and stare from as far as 30 meters. I briefly tell her that I'm not being disrespectful to anyone and that I'm explaining to my colleague the plan for the rest of the afternoon. As a side note, it's obvious she's assumed that I'm bad-mouthing her in some way and presumably has made this assumption because the way she's acted so far has been below the standards I'd expect from human garbage. Mum, still yelling, tells me to get the manager. Now I tell her that I'm the manager and would gladly address her questions if she has any, though I can reassure her there has been no disrespect to anyone so far, and could you please calm down and explain to me what the problem is, as my job is only to help. She calls bullshit and asks for my direct supervisor. I tell her the only person directly above me is the owner and that he's out of state at a conference. She asks for his supervisor and I tell her the only other person she could talk to above me would be the development manager for our state, who is also at the conference. At this point, she's realized that she's not getting hold of another set of ear above mine, so she launches on into a tirade, and I shit you not, word for word. I don't know how you retards do it down here, but I come from poverty-stricken suburb of national renown in the next city. I manage a store there, and up there the customer is always right and should always be respected, and that means, when I pay you, I get what I want and you do not get to say anything about me to anyone. I assured her I hadn't said a word about her, was confused about what she was alluding to, and could she please explain what caused this entire situation in the first place, as I now have a very nice young girl crying in the back of my store, and believe I may have to call security due to continued harassment of mall employees. At this, she pales and calls her sister over, and before she can arrive, I assure her that it would be in her best interests to detail any problem she has with my store to my head office in an incident report on our website. I then handed her a business card and told her as quietly as I could that due to their ongoing escalation of the issue, they were no longer welcome around my premises and I would be getting in contact with mall security to file an incident report and have them permanently barred from shopping at city name shopping center. At saying that, I can honestly say I have never seen two grown-as women run so fast in my life, and by the looks of it, I doubt they'd ever tried to either. Security later swung past, having caught them at one of the exits, and it turned out they'd been shoplifting from a number of boutique stores using their kid's stroller, with the kid still in it, and could I please give them a statement and security camera footage for the interaction. Some fucking people, man. TLDR, if you're going to break the law, don't go drawing attention to yourself like an entitled corkhead. I kind of had to deal with this by proxy but just, wow. I work for a pet service company. We offer a few free services to fancy apartment buildings in exchange for them marketing for us / having a foot in the door. We do dog walking, pet sitting, training, that sort of stuff. And one of the free services is a dog playgroup. Lots of our customers get walks and enjoy the free playgroup, but then there are some people who just get the free stuff, and that's fine. We expect that. But some people take the free stuff and also use a different dog walking / doggy daycare company. It was playgroup day and this customer said she wanted her dog to come to the free service, but his regular walker was coming at noon, so we must have him back at noon. We took him to play and then made an effort to get the dog back right on time. And our employee saw his other walker come into the building, so she knew he was right there. So the dog was picked up in probably 3 to 7 minutes of being dropped off. Apparently our employee didn't know to crate this dog, so she didn't. The regular walker called the owner and said the dog wasn't crated, and the owner flipped, saying the dog could have died. Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Unless this woman regularly leaves poison on her floor, the chances of that are zero. So in her fury she asks to be taken off our client list and wants nothing to do with us. But when the time comes a week or so later for another free service that she sees her neighbors getting, she's furious her dog didn't get one. Yeah, she was pissed she didn't get the services after she asked to be dropped from our client list. Just, ugh. Wasn't a manager for this, but have a story too good to not post here. In my days as a mall cop, I was in the Tim Hortons in the mall to grab a coffee before my shift. I had my earbuds in and wasn't paying much attention until I suddenly saw a lady going insane at the counter. Point I pulled my earbuds out and asked the person in front of me what was going on. She shrugged and said the lady just started yelling after the counter girl asked a question. The woman was yelling, "I want the manager. I want the owner. This is bullshit." I had my jacket on over my uniform and stepped over the line to get in front of the woman and ask what the problem was. In the middle of her yelling at a shift manager, she first told me to fuck off and stay out of it. I explained who I was and that she could leave if she didn't calm down and explain herself. She then tells me to fuck off again, at which point I tell her to leave or the police were going to be called. She then tells me the issue. Woman, she asked me if I wanted a hash brown with my bagel sandwich and coffee, and I think that's rude. I don't want that. Me. Long pause. What? Huh? You heard me. That's rude. I don't want the hash brown. Why is she asking me if I want it? Me. You realize that's part of her job and that literally all you have to do is say no, right? Huh? No. It's ignorant. It's harassment. I want to talk to the owner of this Tim Hortons. Me. Get out of here. Now. You're insane. She then yelled about how she'd never be treated like this in America. This was in Canada, and stormed off. The whole store thanked me for ending the rampage. I work the front desk at a hotel, and we only have one person working at a time. I'm technically the guy in charge, so I guess that makes me manager. I had a guy walk in and want a room. I told him the price, and he was like, okay, and got the room. About 15 minutes later, he comes back down in a fury. He starts yelling at me about how I charged him maximum price for a room, and he wanted to know why I did that. I told him that we only charge one price, that you can only get discounts if you have a AAA, AARP or Gov/military ID, which he had none of. He pulls out his phone and shows me that Expedia has the same room for $10 less, and he asks me why I didn't charge him that much. I try to tell him that we have a special deal with them. We get advertisement for our business and they make commission off each booking. He was having none of it. He then complained about the room and the quality of it, which is pretty nice, but we are only a 2-star hotel, so I don't know how much he was expecting. After I told him I was the one in charge at the moment, he wanted to speak to the owner. We called her up, and she told him the same thing. He was about ready to explode at this point. He stormed off and tried to pull the same sheet on the next employee working to see if he could get a discount. He paid a grand total of $68. There's a 3-star hotel down the road that has rooms for $110 a night. If he wanted a better hotel, TLDR, guy complains that Expedia had a room cheaper than the walk-in price and complains that I didn't charge him the Expedia price. A few below. I worked in customer service for 10 years. In the thousands of calls it's hard to pick out just one, they kinda blur into levels of stupidity. Was offshore opening a site, working through the flood of let me speak to your manager / I wanna speak to an American. About 60 to 80% of our calls were being pushed to this site. Chances are you gonna go offshore. Got a handoff from an agent. Customer had been calling and hanging up constantly for like the last 2 hours. Customer asks me if I'm American, to which I said yes. Starts explaining his issue, then for some reason asks where I'm located, to which I replied with my physical location, the offshore site. He hangs up and proceeds to do that for the next 3 days. A few calls an hour for the next 3 days. This guy dials, asks for a manager, gets me, then just hangs up. Over and over and over again. At the end of the 3 days he gives in, spends a few minutes yelling about how he's going to take his business elsewhere, then updates his address. This dude spent hours raging about something he could do online in seconds, never having to deal with anybody. As long as I could remember his account number to do the occasional check. Never actually changed companies. I can't even imagine the desire To waste that much of your time. Around the same time, got this military guy wanted to speak to a manager because the offshore employee couldn't possibly understand his issue adequately. There was a language barrier. His issue, he'd maximum the number of withdrawals he could get for free from his lend and expected us to do something about it. There was a fee he was balking about. We never saw it. It wasn't charged by us. It went to our intermediary company that all government payments go through. I think they had a limit of like 3 for free. After that there was a fee. Either way, not a fee we charged or could do anything about. Wanted to speak with someone in our company that could make that go away, like we would negotiate for him solely. Referred him back to his co or his senator cause yeah, we are your bank, nothing else. Then there was the issue about us verifying info. He wanted to go round and round with this because his cable company would read out his phone number when asking to verify, whereas we did not. This guy legit wanted to argue about why our verification policies were different. I said we are two different companies. I'm assuming you're bundled, so you may or may not be calling from a location they get a lot more detail on. And lastly, is this really what you want to waste your day on? I get paid to talk to you. You are wasting your time. TL doctor, I told a customer buying Macup what products she could use on her deeper skin tone, and I'm now racist because I don't want her looking dead in the club. I worked in a high-end Macup store in Manhattan. We saw all kinds of people with all kinds of complexions and concerns, and you learned pretty fast what words work best to cushion or blow for some of the stuff. For example, texture instead of wrinkles, deeper or richer instead of darker. One thing that's always fun to have to explain is what flashback is. On deeper skin tones, a lot of setting powders will catch the light when flash photos are taken. It'll basically make the person look like they have baby powder on their face or make them look grey. It's super embarrassing and sort of immediately tells the world you don't know how to use your Macup. Also, all your photos from your event or night out are ruined. So it's pretty sucky all around. Side note, I'm blonde and I use cocaine mixed with whiteout as a bronzer. I'm really white. I was talking to a customer who had amazing, super deep skin. She was real cool and I was talking to her like a regular human being, and she was looking for a setting powder. Her friend was with her who was like honey beige, so pretty light. She was trying to get her to buy a translucent, which translates to white people and white people who are tan. When I asked her how she was going to use it, she had planned to bake Macup baking with it, and that cut out like 80% of the setting powders we had. This was a couple years ago, so we didn't have all that many med deep appropriate setting powders yet. I explained to her what flashback was, and I told her that she could set her Macup with a powder foundation or either of these two setting powders. I told her that her friends might really like some other one and tell you to buy it, but with your beautiful skin, you kind of have to use different products. I then said that at some point the Macup industry will realize that there is an entire continent that also needs to set their Macup, but apparently we are not there yet. The customer laughed. She picked up one of the things I was showing her and said thank you, in that you're so kind. I'm so happy I found you today, kind of sing-song tone. Some other customer overheard some of this conversation and told my manager I was telling a customer that we didn't serve people like her. She apparently was yelling at my manager about how racist I was. I was so comfortable in this conversation with my equal that at some point I had said dark skin instead of deeper skin tones. This is apparently a huge insult to some people. It wasn't, however, to the woman living in her deeper skin tone skin looking for a damn setting powder. The woman who complained was a white lady. I was furious. Not only because this random woman overheard something that made me look racist. I was mad because I'm white, and color theory and oxidation. A lot of deep shades look great when you first swatch, but turn orange in an hour or so. For deeper skin tones is a lot more complicated, than for white folks. It took me years to understand the differences in tone and shade and how the products oxidize. It took me just as long to learn how to tell a black woman that 80% of what we sell here isn't gonna work for you, and have her leave happy, confident, and not disappointed. Working in a relatively higher price chain restaurant that somehow attracts those in the lesser affordability spectrum, I have my fair share of stories I'll share too. Lady calls in to cancel her reservation for the evening. We don't have a reservation in our system. Hostess hands me the phone. Lady is very upset that we don't have a reservation that she is looking to cancel. There is zero record of her in our system, and my hosts have not been known to just completely not make a reservation for a guest while they're on the phone with them. Why even answer the call if you're going to do that? Anyways, lady demands compensation because what if she had come in for her reservation? I politely tell her that we would have simply addressed that situation when it came up, and it would have been no problem finding room for her party of 2 had she actually come in to dine with us, refused her request, asked if she would like to dine with us anyways, completely blew up at me, asked for all the numbers of all the higher ups. Never heard a word about it. Number 2. Didn't happen to me, but my fellow manager, who is actually my GM now. All of this is from what I saw on the security footage and first-hand accounts table of 3, woman, man, and teenage boy, that are known to be constant complainers. Gasp. Didn't like their food. After having a few go-arounds with them about their experience, manager gets their food made completely correct to their ridiculous specifications. He brings the food to the table and explains that they will be eating for free today, but to please never come back to our restaurant because we obviously can't operate to their standards. Lady loses her shot and throws a pint glass at the manager face, and the teenage son jumps on the manager's back. Manager is about 280 pounds, not a small man. A few long seconds later, the other dude at the table stands up but instantly gets detained with a giant bear hug by a guest sitting at the bar. Short scuffle between the lady, son, manager, staff, and guests ensue. The dude that got bear hugged somehow talked his way out from his captor and, rather than go help his wife/girlfriend/baba mama who was swinging her way out of the building, or his son/brother/girlfriend's kid who was being held on the ground in a choke hold by a very large and angry man, this guy, lol. We still laugh about it. This guy instead walks back to his table and continues to shovel his goddamn meal into his face like nothing even happened. This is a funny one for me. I run a small guest house. I'm 27. I have a mostly shaved head and I'm not a smart dresser often. Usually when I open the door, people are always like, "Are there any staff around?" or "Where's the manager?" Well, it's just me. We have a policy that all extra guests must be paid for as our room prices are per person rather than per room. That allows me to keep prices lower for a single person. We had a guy who stayed for 2 days. He was about 65 and 190 brow, flagrant looking young man, and at 11:30 p.m. I poked my head out of my door. My house is built into the guest house, and informed him he would have to pay for his guest. He was fine with it. They went upstairs and 30 minutes later, his guest left. It was pretty much 99% obvious that he was a prostitute. So the guy paid and left. He didn't seem all too happy. So, first I got an email, really long one, absolutely absurd. It was obvious to me he was gauging what I knew before he left a review. After my first reply he said he was going to call the manager. So he called me. He thought he was speaking to someone else and wouldn't accept that I was the only manager and staff member he could talk to. Emails continued. After I made it clear to him what I thought was going when he stayed, his reply was as simple as, "Oh, okay, would I be allowed to stay again sometime?" No, I made it clear in the last line of my email previous to this reply. The whole issue here was he contacted every number and platform we are on, booking.com, our 2 emails, 3 phone numbers, just to get hold of a manager. He was convinced there was someone else to talk to. They always are in this circumstance. Another guy came into the guest house, and not long after checking in, which took an hour, long story and really frustrating too, he decided to let me know that he is a nudist. I had to go out, and I left my girlfriend in charge. I got a call from her, and she said she came home, and he was at the door having a cigarette. He asked her if she worked there, and she said yes, she sort of does, and he asked her to give him a wake-up call at 8 p.m. with no reason. I came home and knocked on his room to tell him I will be doing the wake-up call later on, and he instantly changed his mind. I wonder why. The same guy had also moved everything away from the window at the back, presumably to stand naked in front of the window, but he also ran out of toilet paper, and instead of asking for more, he used a wet towel to wipe his faking ass. When he left an email to say he would be returning, so I replied to his email to say unfortunately due to the events that occurred during your last stay you are unwelcome to stay again, he complained. At first he tried to complain to a manager which as usual just got through to me. Booking.com got involved, and after a lengthy discussion with both parties, they banned him from Booking.com. Honestly, I have stories for days coming from this place. Both of those stories above have way more details to add, but ICBF. Work for a passenger railroad in Cincinnati 23M. Wear reflective/high-vis shirt and pants. We have to run ahead of our dinner train and flag each crossing, stopping traffic due to a ridiculous rule set by the railroad we run on. Mind you, we go 7 to 10 miles per hour, fairly easy to keep up with. Saturday, I drive up to a crossing with the lights flashing already and start flagging cars across, since the train is at least 1 minute away. Middle-aged man drives up to me, stops before the crossing. I wave harder at him to come through. He speeds up beside me and stops on the crossing. I don't know you're with the railroad. You could just be some yahoo. What? Okay sir. Continue on. The train is right there. Why should I listen to some young kid like you? Because if you don't, you're getting hit by the faking train. Now move. Be speaking with your manager. As he drives off, I get pissed and throw flag on ground. An hour later I'm back as the train goes the other way. My general manager, 23M, 6 feet tall, is standing with me helping protect the crossing. Man returns, yells at him, "Hoss your manager? I'd like to report him for being an asshole." Boss looks at me, turns to him, and says I am. Now get the fuck off my railroad. Guy gently drives away. TLDR. Older man stops on railroad tracks, is asshole. Manager is bigger, better asshole. Oh man, I just remembered the most frustrating one. Rundown. Couple staying in double room, female. 35, male. 39, male is built like a stone sheet house, totally bald and looks aggressive as fuck. Female is like an Instagram model, covered in tattoos and loads of makeup. Very pretty though. Stay 2 nights additional. They went to the same club as the group of 19 to 21 year olds in my family room downstairs. 4 people. So, they came in the first day and seemed like really nice people, but after 30 minutes they were having vigorous sex for hours. How do I know? Because their room 2 is directly above my living room. Whatever people do have sex, it's natural. Except for the noise coming from these 2 made me think there was more like 8 to 9 people in there. So that night they started arguing. Mostly him, but it was non-stop. They went out, the kids downstairs went out, and at 2 AM, they all came back together. The man and woman went into the ground floor room and had an after party to 5 AM, at which point a guest left to go to the airport 3 hours early, so he could actually get some rest. The man and woman went upstairs at 5 AM too, only to proceed back to having sex until 9 AM. Around midday they went out, then came back arguing. I should note that at this point, they had slammed every door in the house. Whenever they used one, she knocked on my door with a broken picture frame which has my rules and contact/fire safety info on it. It was obvious that they had slammed the door open and it smashed. She handed it to me and said it just fell off. I said, "Okay, I'll go vacuum up the glass out of the carpet." I said no need to worry, they are only cheap frames. Okay, we are just going out. They went out. They came back 1 hour later. They went into room 1 downstairs again, and I had my flat door open because I was busy in the guest house, and I heard them say we just went to the last post for breakfast blah blah. Everything after that was pretty normal. 1 week later I get this title: manager ought to be more friendly and care about his guests. Pros, clean rooms. Cons. When closing the door, the information sheet was held up by a screw and a bit of glass over it, which broke on my foot when I knocked and told the manager he didn't care or apologize. We had to leave early to go to a hospital as I had glass in my foot. Arg, the audacity. What did she expect? A refund or something? It's funny because they don't know me at all, and if they did they would know I'm overzealous when it comes to making sure people are cleaned and band-aided or bandaged up in case of injury. It's like saying the Queen ran into your local pub and down at someone's pint and ran away. Point also the hospital part. What a joke. Our local R&D takes a minimum of 4 hours to be seen. They were only gone for an hour at most. Lady got a body lotion as a gift. This particular lotion was 5+ years old, so I explained that if she returned it and didn't exchange it, she would get back $1 point. She argued that the price sticker said $11.50. You're ripping me off, how dare you, blah blah. Yes ma'am. So I offer to show her something else so she can get her money's worth. She demands to see the ingredients of every product we have because they are all poison and she doesn't want to be poisoned. She starts asking me how each ingredient was made and sourced. I said I was happy to give her the number for customer service. She said she wanted something lavender because she heard from a magazine that lavender is relaxing and a stress reliever. I show her every lavender item we have and she says she wants one that doesn't have poison in it. Finally convince her to get a lavender perfume to use on her linens. I tell her I need her ID to do the exchange and she accuses me of trying to steal her identity. She flashes open her wallet and closes it saying that's all you're gonna get. My manager had been watching this entire situation and finally piped up to reinforce that we couldn't do the exchange without the ID, and she called us both ridiculous unhelpful thieves who were trying to poison her and then steal her identity. Long story short, she read her ID number and left. Next day she comes storming in demanding to speak to me because I sold her a defective product and she said that the perfume wouldn't spray. I took the cap off and sprayed it. The mist cloud was in the air nowhere near her and she started coughing and dry heaving and waving her hands to swat it away, screaming at me that how dare I spray it because it was gonna poison her. I explained that she would have to press harder on the plunger in order for it to spray, but it was not defective and I'd be happy to exchange it for another, but they are all the same and would need to be pressed equally as hard. She then comically tried to spray it with the weakest finger strength I've ever seen, then left in a huff about how we wasted her money. TLDR psycho lady tries to return 5-year-old lotion for full price, then accuses us of poisoning her and stealing her identity. I run a comic book store. One day we are running a Pokemon card tournament. Woman comes in with 2 kids, 5 and 8-year-old, and another kid's friend, 8. They show up, pay their entry fee. She then tells us that they've never played before. I'm sitting there like, okay, hard mode time. I can do this. I've got an hour to build 3 decks and teach them how to play. I've got this. 20 minutes goes by and I'm finally at the teaching stage. Everyone is having a great time. I turn to the youngest kid and ask him to read a card for me and he says I can't read. What the fuck? So I'll let the kids play and call the mother. I tell her that her kid can't read and can't participate in the tournament. She wants to leave him there. I want her to come pick him up. There was 2 staff members and 24 kids. No way I can keep track of one kid not participating. So I hit her with the I'm not a dick line. What a mistake. This woman goes off, yelling, screaming, demanding the owner, etc. I tell her she's got to come get him, and I hang up. 15 minutes later she's in the store, screaming and yelling. She demands the owner's cell number. Fact, no, I'm not giving you that. She starts calling me names, insinuating that I'm being mean to her because I don't get laid. At this point I ban her and her kids. Drop everyone from the tournament and tell them to leave or I'll call the cops for trespassing. They leave. End of story. Right? Wrong. Next day my coworker gets a call. Yes, this is Constable's and I need the personal contact information for me and owner, as woman's name, would like to press charges. My coworker, bless her heart, says that she needs to see a badge before giving out that information and then ends the call. In this woman's infinite wisdom she got her husband to impersonate a police officer to try and get my personal cell number to harass me. I call my local police precinct. Unfortunately the call wasn't recorded, so it's shaky grounds to press charges, so that's where the story ends. Obligatory, not a manager, but I witnessed this. I work at an airport for Tahiti Budget Airlines. I just do the cleaning on planes, but I was out in the concourse waiting on a plane to unload. Before I could go and clean it, a man walked up to one of the gate agents and told her that he had an emergency and needed to be on the next plane to Seattle. Well, he had a ticket for a flight to Denver that was boarding in 15 minutes. He had already checked in, paid, sent his bags to the plane going to Denver, and gone through security. The gate agent explained to him that we didn't have any Seattle flights that day, and he wouldn't have been able to get his money back for the Denver flight. He looked confused and said that a Delta flight was leaving for Seattle in 10 minutes. He wanted on that plane, and he wanted it free of cost. Gate agent told him no, she couldn't possibly do that, and he started to get upset. Talked on the phone to gate agent's supervisor, who told him the same thing. Eventually a manager walked up and explained that we don't interact with Delta at all. If he wanted a Delta ticket, he'd have to go back to the ticket counter and buy a ticket through Delta. Even then, the Seattle flight was in the final boarding process and he couldn't even walk from where he was standing to the concourse. Delta is in on the time. The guy just kept repeating that he had an emergency and we needed to put him on that flight, which we couldn't possibly do. He was a super entitled jackass. Eventually the guy walked off and didn't get on the Denver flight, but his bags sure did. TLDR, guy on budget airline flight to Denver wants us to switch his flight to a Delta flight to Seattle for free. We don't work with Delta. Guy doesn't understand how airlines work. He doesn't get on any flights that day. His bags go to Denver. The theater I work at has a customer appreciation week every summer, where movies are free. Needless to say, every cheapskate within a 50-mile radius shows up, not just our good customers. This makes it very busy. If you want a seat, you better show up 30 minutes early. Want to sit together? 45 minutes. Some people come and grab tickets a couple hours early then leave, which is fine, but we warn them that they still need to come back early if they want to sit together. Well, two non-regulars that we've never seen before decide to show up 10 minutes before our most popular movie. They had gotten tickets early but wanted snacks. The line for concessions is super long and the popcorn machine is tiny and trying its best to keep up. Nevertheless, they joined the line. It takes them 20 minutes to get their popcorn and soda. They then try to find seats in the theater, which is completely sold out. Surprise surprise, they can't find any. They come screaming up to the still busy concession stand, and the manager goes in and informs them that there are seats free, just not together. They say that this is unacceptable and demand we stop the movie, make everyone move, so they can sit together and completely restart the film. No. My manager informs them that they should have gotten here earlier. They start screaming at her that we should have reserved seats and rope them off for people who bought tickets early. They then demanded a refund for their concessions, which were somehow half gone already. You did not buy tickets. They were free. We do not have numbered seats. We are a small theater and aren't that fancy. Also, we don't want to deal with that crap. We are not going to rope seats off so that you're entitled as can swagger in 10 minutes into the movie. My manager gave them a refund just to get them to leave. They said they were never coming back. Oh no. An hour later she gets a complaint via email about the rude employees at the theater that should be fired. It was detailed. They hadn't realized that the head manager had been helping them. She had to walk away before she replied to that one. TLDR, get your free movie early. Sorry for the novel. Also sorry for formatting. I'm on mobile. Working as a convenience store manager, I had a woman demand to speak to me on Christmas Day because she bought the wrong phone card for her prepaid phone. Those are non-refundable. No matter how much you bitch and complain, it is almost impossible to get money back unless the store screwed up and gave you the wrong thing. In this case we did not, and the customer even admitted that she screwed up. Even so, honestly, because it was Christmas Day, I might have just taken the $40 loss and gave her the money. However, this woman had my cashier almost in tears before she started screaming me at the moment she answered when I called her back. She also admitted she asked for the wrong card. She's also doing all this on the one holiday we are supposed to be nice to everyone. Yay. I wish I could say I politely told her she could shove that phone card up her ass and to have a Merry Christmas. Instead I told her to come see me on Monday, hoping she wouldn't show up. She did, and by the time she left she had a full refund because she had called corporate, and they're a bunch of assholes who have never tried to keep control of a gas station in the ghetto. Point to me. That is the worst part of management. Having to give in to Winnie Beaches who really and truly need to be told to fuck off. Businesses that give in too easily and care more about one customer than loyal employees should all fail. I might still be a little salty at that company. My dad loves to tell this story. Point: he was in line for customer service at media. Think Walmart, but only in Michigan and bordering states. I think the guy in front of him is returning a small metal toolbox. The man swears the toolbox was bought the week before and he would like a refund, though he has no receipt. Point: the manager looks at the toolbox. It is dented, dinged, rusted at the corners, and generally fatigued to hell. He says, "Sir, this toolbox cannot have been bought last week. This is a toolbox from Toolerific and Media hasn't carried Toolerific tools in the past 2 years. Because Toolerific went out of business 2 years ago." Customer launches into, "How dare you? This shitty thing is brand new. It's not my fault it's shitty." The manager opens the drawers. In the drawers the outlines of tools like wrenches, chisels, and ratchets can clearly be seen because they are outlined in red/orange rust stains on the black painted steel. He demonstrates this to the customer as further proof this toolbox is not a week old. "My tools are old, so what? This box is a week old and it's a piece of shit. I want my refund." The manager attempts 2 or 3 more times to persuade the customer into dropping his ludicrous claim. Finally, he asks, "Sir, how much did this item cost?" The customer replies with a total of just under $30. The manager pulls out his own wallet from his back pocket, retrieves a $10 and a $20, slaps them on the counter and motions for the next customer to step forward. Point: when my dad points out how unfair that was to refund the compulsive liar for his toolbox, the manager shrugs and says, "Money well spent, honestly." There's two that I feel are equal. I'll start with the longer one. Point: I used to work at a McDonald's and I had this woman come in and order a McDouble made to order. Okay, sure, no problem. Kitchen makes it. Before she leaves I have her check it. She thinks they used meat that was not immediately cooked. We keep food in a heated cabinet. She thought we used some cooked meat from there. Give her the BOTD and ask my kitchen to remake it, and I watch them and have her watch them from the counter area since we can both clearly see the grill back there, and confirm that she can see them working. They remake it, again confirm that the sandwich is good with her, and she says it's good and leaves. 1 hour later, phone rings. It's her. This is the phone call where I think I gained respect from all of my crew at that store. I had recently been transferred in. My McDouble is cold and I want it replaced and my money back. In the woman's defense, she started off nice and respectable. Once the no entered her eardrums is when all hell broke loose on the phone. Threats to sue, report me to corporate, have me fired, etc. Point were mentioned, as well as explicit language not suitable for children without adult supervision. Still a no. Hung up. Never heard from her again, except in my head, where the last thing she said still makes me laugh to this day. I will be made whole. The crew started respecting me more for actually saying no to a customer instead of being a spineless beach. Second story is much shorter. Just transferred to a different store, and after a month or so of working there, a girl files a sexual harassment complaint against a male coworker. Immediately goes to the supervisor and GM. No shift managers are involved in the investigation as we could not assist in any way, shape or form. These two barely worked shifts together, so it's not like we could separate them. They already were. One night while the girl is working with me, her father calls up. He asks for a manager. He is not happy that the male has not been fired immediately with having a claim against him for sexual harassment. I explain that my bosses are investigating. He's not having it. Threatens to sue, call the news, what have you. Normally I wouldn't be bothered by this, but the way he talked, his calmness in saying everything, how deep his voice was, it just freaked me out really bad. I was shaking for a good hour after that call ended. I laughed with a couple of my crew with how shaken up I was over it. The girl felt bad. I worked in Petco. I wasn't the manager, however I was right next to him when it happened. Lady came in 2 minutes before closing demanding to buy a guinea pig for her daughter's birthday. No offense to a lot of people, but animals for birthday gifts aren't the best idea if you're gonna be spontaneous. I said sure, but I asked if she has any knowledge and care for the animal. She told me she's had a hamster a long time ago and that they were pretty much the same thing. I told her she should read on our handbook to understand the care for it a little bit better. She said she didn't have time and just wants to get it boxed and leave. I asked if she had any kind of enclosure or food for the animal. She replies, "Fuck it, where's your manager?" So he walks up and asks the lady what's the issue. Lady told him that she just wants the animal and that's all. Manager asks her the same questions. She said she will buy everything it needs the next day on Amazon because it's cheaper. It makes perfect sense, but we couldn't let her buy it now that we know she has no knowledge or care of the poor thing. She threatened to call corporate that we are cheap as holes who won't give her an animal without buy our products. At this point we are 30 minutes past closing time, so manager guy told her she needs to leave or he's gonna have to call the cops. Oh, I forgot, her husband was with her. So I was told to go call the cops. She runs off and with a couple of kind remarks. He didn't say a damn thing. Poor guy was terrified of her. Had a manager that in a lot of ways was a huge dick. Kinda pervy according to my then girlfriend. Allegedly cut hours if you complained about something, but his dealing with troublesome customers was perfect. One time a guy walked in wanting to trade in his Xbox 360 along with a few dozen games and accessories. After all the scanning, checking the discs, the console, the accessories, took at least 30 to 40 minutes. He's still faffing about, claiming he's not sure if he wants to sell it, causing us to start multiple times. Finally we finish and give his total. As can be expected at Game UK version of GameStop, it was lower than he'd get on eBay. He beached and moaned. We told him that was the price, we couldn't change it, and so on. Finally after 5 minutes of screaming he asks for the manager. My boss walks out. The guys is still practically screaming about how we are ripping him off, how these are terrible prices, and so on. Boss guy listens for about 30 seconds and then says sorry, but those prices are final. Customer is screaming again. So boss just interrupts him by cancelling the transaction, pushing the stack of stuff towards the customer and saying if you have such a problem with this, then fuck off and get the fuck out of my store. I love the guy's stunned face. He tried to say something about how he's gonna call corporate and so on, but manager wasn't having it. Okay, great, I don't give a fuck. You do that. Never did hear a complaint from corporate. I was working in a camera store in a mall when suddenly I see a woman coming storming down the hallway towards the store. She was still 2 stores away when she started screaming at me. My manager put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I got this," and stepped in front of me to take the full onslaught of this woman's rage. Apparently the situation that she had returned a camera to us without returning all of what was contained in the packaging. We were holding some photo finishing work of hers hostage until she either returned the missing pieces or paid a 15% repackaging fee. This situation had apparently been brewing for some time. She was yelling so loud for so long that a crowd began to form to watch her rage. The lady from the coffee shop in the food court showed up with some free coffees, saying we would probably need them. The kicker for me was when a deaf man, who didn't notice what was going on, showed up needing help. I had to help him at one end of the counter while the woman was raging away at the other. Eventually the woman got fed up and stormed out. On the way out of the store she made eye contact with manager of the clothing store across the hall and he immediately burst out laughing. She then ran over and began raging at him. He was literally on the floor rolling with laughter while she was standing over him hollering. Wasn't a manager, but a part-timer. Anyway, I was working for a chain ramen restaurant, and on that particular day a lady and her family, husband and 3 kids, came in. After their food came, she was pissed, and I mean really pissed off, that we didn't provide them with metal spoons for their soups. Our standard type of spoon for soup was the kind you'd see in Chinese restaurants, those porcelain ones. She demanded that I get her a metal spoon and a bowl for her youngest kid, which I reckon was just a few years old. So I got her a kid's bowl and a metal teaspoon for her kid, which just infuriated her more for some reason. Proceeded to say things like, "This place has such bad service. And are you a part-timer? Is that why?" Most probably implying that part-timers don't get things right. She demanded for my floor manager, telling him I didn't give her the right spoon. Apparently she wanted a tablespoon, which she didn't mention to me. Manager just gave her another spoon, while she stated that she'd never come here again. Both my manager and I just walked off to attend to other customers, and while walking my manager just said, "I hope she'll do what she said she'll do. She has issues." Made me crack a smile. TLDR, customer that acts like she has anger management issues pissed off when I comply with what she asked me to do and calls for my manager instead. Not a manager, but the guy who was asked to see a manager. I was working the cash register at Little Caesars during the Friday evening rush 6 or 7 years ago. As you might expect, during this time we can't keep pizzas in the hot box. As soon as they come out of the oven, they're heading out the door. This one lady comes in and says that she called ahead and asked us to leave a pizza out to cool so that it would be cool enough to eat by the time she got there. None of us remembered this call, and even if we had, the pizza probably went out the door with one of the other 24 customers we'd had in the last 20 minutes. This lady goes nuts, yelling at me and then my manager that she had called ahead, etc. Then she starts saying that she had planned to let her kids have pizza on their way to her Bible study, which was why she wanted the pizza cool. She left the kids in the car. Fortunately, my manager offered to let her have a fresh pizza, but she declined and stormed off in a huff. Then she comes back in and says, "Now my kids are crying because they won't get anything to eat. I hope you're happy with yourselves." My manager, the other customers, and I were dumbfounded. She'd refused a free pizza simply because it would have been too hot, and then had the audacity to blame us for her kids going hungry. The worst part? There was a McDonald's and a Publix across the street. Let me chime in. So I work in a place where we don't really have managers. So everything is kind of a seniority thing, and if you've been there the longest you generally will be the manager of that shift. Well, during one of these shifts I was that person. So I work in a Subway type restaurant where people pick their toppings and our toppings bar is separated from customers by a tall piece of glass with a small gap in the bottom, called the sneeze guard. People really like to think of this barrier as a suggestion and simply stick their hands, face, and whatever body parts they have over the sneeze guard and point at their toppings with their fingers, being super close to the damn topping. Now with this behavior I'm usually pretty lax, giving the customer a friendly warning, but one lady faking decided that her damn 2-year-old was gonna faking hover over the sneeze guard, and oh man was I pissed. I told her politely but firmly that her hovering her kid on top of toppings is actually a health hazard and can contaminate the food. And this lady was so offended that I said this that she started getting all beachy, like I attacked her kid and called him a dirty fuck or something. But in reality, that sneeze guard protects the topping from customers sneezing or spitting into the toppings. It also protects it from customers touching the toppings. Cause sorry I don't know where people's hands have been. And then after that she had the nerve to have her kid stand on the faking toppings bar, cause I guess her barely literate 2 years old really needs to see these faking toppings and that she's too faking lazy to carry the faking thing. Now I mentioned earlier that this sneeze guard had a small gap at the bottom because where she currently had her kid standing was literally right by this gap with the toddler's shoes wedged into the gap literally inches away from the toppings. I don't know about anybody else, but that sheet does not fly with me. I then had to again politely but firmly explain to this dumbass beach that this is still again not acceptable behavior, and then she demanded to speak to a higher up, which was me, and afterwards she scoffed and acted like I'm the worst human being in the world when I'm just trying to make sure everyone gets a clean, non-contaminated meal. I'm not a manager, but once while working the cash register at the seasonal candy shop at Masses, a woman got a manager because I wouldn't open a box of Frangos to give her a free sample because that's illegal. The manager then came over and opened a box and gave everyone a free sample. Vertical bar jokes on them though, because everyone who works the candy counter eats from the damages pile when there's no manager out there, which is against policy. Also, close bracket. Also had a guy speak to a manager because his store card wasn't working and he was outraged. He comes in the store once a year to buy one pair of socks for his wife, never buys anything else, and is mad that his store card doesn't work. It gets better. His store card was a Bon March card. Masses bought Bon March like 15 years ago, and Bon March no longer actually exists, but I guess they were honoring the old Bon March store cards. Anyway, this was like 2013, so he's mad that his card for a store that hasn't existed since like 2004 doesn't work anymore. For the one pair of socks that he buys once a year, that would net him like a $0.50 discount point, but it was cool because he was angry at the store and not me, and when the manager came over she made sure to tell him it wasn't my fault. The managers there can be shitty, and so can the customers, but it was awesome nobody blamed for that ridiculous situation. Got a couple stories. I'm a manager at Subway, and one of these was a super jacked up dude, like the whole gym junkie outfit and persona, was there with his girlfriend. I was on with a new girl, and she was serving them while I tried to get breads baked. She gave them their food. They went and sat down. Minute or two later he comes to the counter with his sub and asks my coworker to talk to the manager. She asks what's wrong, and he tells her the sub is bullshit and straight up throws his sub against the wall nearby and storms out. Poor girlfriend says nothing and just follows him out, looking shocked. He came back again numerous times in the following weeks/months. I never once saw his girlfriend again. Probably his ex-girlfriend after that point. Second one was an old dude who was standing in line ordering food when a teenager came up and snatched $50 out his hand and ran off. He'd been holding it in hand and was standing with both hands clasped behind his back. He got so fucking mad, and the kid wasn't there for him to yell at. He starts asking for me to get the manager. I'm the faking manager. Next he starts asking to see security camera footage. I have to explain to him that I can't let him see our security cameras without police permission. And if he wants to see the footage he has to go to the cops, and then the cops come and get our footage, and then they will show it to him. I explain this like 5 times and each time he gets angrier and angrier about it. He acts like I'm deliberately trying to hinder him. But fuck, it was a legal thing and I wasn't about to get my ass sued for showing security camera footage to some random dude just cause he was yelling a bit. I called security and the cops about the incident for him, neither of which were things I was required to do. Theft happened in our store, but wasn't mine, or the store's property that was stolen. Calling cops and center security was his responsibility. Mate, your $50 isn't worth whatever penalty that was gonna get me. Yeah, that one still pisses me off. Just served the one here again today about 5 months later. Cranky old bastard. Didn't make eye contact with me. Edit. I should probably say that I was also very kind and tried to be helpful the whole time. That's how you survive these people. Smile through everything, be pleasant and as helpful as you can, and eventually they'll get embarrassed when they calm down and realize that they're being morons and you're being kind with them. You usually never see someone again after they have an outburst either, not if you don't lose your temper with them. I take comfort in the fact that most of the people who've been like that are likely embarrassed by their behavior. I was a supervisor in a hotel for a bit. It was a full service hotel where you can order room service, movies, etc. And as with any full service hotel we required a $50 authorization on a credit or debit card. If you don't use it then it drops off. That applies to third-party reservations too, Expedia, Booking.com, etc. I was in the back, and I heard this dude yelling at one of the front desk girls. He was freaking out about the $50 authorization, saying how he stays in hotels all the time, and has never heard of such a thing. In fact he stays at Hilton all the time and they never require an authorization, which I knew was bullshit. They just add it onto the total, don't inform the guest, and it will drop off, and they just don't notice. I called Hilton right down the street and oh, they require a $75 hold. He proceeds to tell me I'm a liar. That was my friend who I kept on lock for this very reason. Told me that he was sorry I was so uneducated about how the world works. On his way out he screamed he was going to be calling Congress and I would be hearing from Trump within the week, because he finally has a president who watches his back. Oh my god. How can you be so delusional? Another good one was a woman who went up and down the block taking pictures of homeless people, or just people she thought were homeless. This is in New York City, where there are homeless people everywhere. She brings her pictures to the desk and tells me that I need to get rid of these people because she doesn't feel safe. They're on the sidewalk half a block away. The hotel can't do anything about that. So what did she do? She called the police. They never showed up, and she drove me crazy the whole night waiting for them and wanting to be escorted by a staff member anytime she went anywhere. Worked for a GameStop as an assistant store manager, which I got promoted to pretty quickly right out of college. I didn't have much management experience at the time, so it's pretty much where I learned how to deal with customer/clients. The store is run in a pawn law state, so anyone who trades in must present a valid ID and be thumbprinted for auditable records. Most people are chill with this, but once in a while we would receive some pushback. One of the SGAs working at the time was beginning the trade of a pretty trashy lady for her son's games. Everything was fine and dandy until the legal documentation process came up with the rigmarole it includes. She became suddenly hostile and started assuming someone would be able to steal her data, find her, and rap her. Yes, I did say, she said find me and rap me. Now this woman was frumpy and trashy in so many ways that I believed the most sinister villain would not partake. She demanded to speak with the manager, me, at the time, and I proceeded to meticulously explain, calmly, why we do this. She didn't calm down, but instead started crying and protesting about her safety. At this point, I was all slash and just helped her pack the games, so she could leave. Point maybe drugs, but that was an interesting moment in retail. I'm not a manager. But when I used to work in a fried chicken department we had a policy on all chicken orders. If you didn't pick up your order within 1 hour of your reservation time we had to cool it down. This was food safety rules to prevent bacteria growth. Now if you showed up after that hour you could buy that chicken cold or wait until we had an opening in the shift to fry you a fresh batch. Point this woman had a 500 piece order of chicken to be picked up at 7 o'clock. 8 o'clock rolls around and she never shows up. We were pretty pissed because that's a lot of chicken we have to deal with in the morning. Point our department closes at 8 o'clock, so we begin cooling the oil down in the fryers and doing other cleaning chores in the department. This woman shows up at almost 9 o'clock and demands we fry her fresh chicken. Point she refuses to buy the cold chicken and demands we fry her fresh chicken. Mind you, all of our fryers are full of cold oil now. They need to be filtered. Just to get them up and running is at least a 30-minute process. Plus we can only fry 3 loads of 100 pieces at a time. Point we were pissed, but told her if she wanted fresh chicken then it would be at least an hour wait. Possibly an hour and a half. She wasn't having any of that and demands to speak to the manager. Bless that woman. I called the manager on duty over and explained the situation and why we had to cool down her chicken and that the kitchen is half shut down for the night and it was going to take time to get the fresh chicken cooled. Point the manager looked at her and said, well, you can wait for the fresh chicken or you can take the cold chicken. This woman gets beyond angry and starts screaming that she wants her 500 pieces of chicken for free. The manager, who is a very short older woman, simply says no, you were explained the rules and those are your options. This woman begins to posture and tower over the manager and say, I demand to speak to your manager. She simply crosses her arms and says, I'm the manager. She took the cold chicken and huffed her way out the door. Bless that manager. Debbie, you're a lifesaver cause I didn't want to work 2 hours late. Guy orders 2 items, $700 total, from me over the phone. A week later, after receiving items, he calls back extremely upset, claims to not have known we were charging him for the second item since I took the order. I remember the convo and specifically stating the prices. I offer to refund him the second item. Upon its return he starts to yell at me that he is going to keep the second item and I better refund him the cost for it. Being frustrated at this point, I yell back, something I have never done. He then say, let me talk to your manager, which I reply, I'm the faking manager. He hangs up. Point calls back 2 minutes later, demands to speak to the owner, who was sitting next to me during our first convo. Yells at him, says he is calling his credit card company to refute the charges and that he is going to keep both items. Owner yells back at him, says fuck you, Hangs up. Point flash forward a couple weeks and we receive a letter from the credit card company about the disputed charges. I write back, explained the situation, starting off by saying I can only imagine he called up yelling at you the whole time because he did the same to us. Also how he refused a refund for returning the items, claiming how he was going to keep them without paying for them. Point credit card company sided with us. Thanks for the $700 as whole. Good thing we are a small company who don't take shit. I can only imagine how many times that type of scam works on larger companies. I used to work front desk, and I had one man call our switchboard, and it was obvious he called the wrong company. I told him he had the wrong number. Normally people either accept this, or try to accuse me of lying, before accepting it and redialing. Not this guy. No. Point first, he asks me what number he dialed. I told him I wasn't sure, since I had several numbers routed to me. We had a really outdated switchboard which didn't give any info. He argues with me that, if I don't know which number he dialed, how can I know he had the wrong number? I told him he had the wrong company. He argued with me, because he dialed the number that someone had written down for him. Point he straight out refuses to accept that he had the wrong number. He hangs up and hits redial. Go through the same thing. Hangs up, hits redial. Tells me that he's going to keep doing it until I tell him what number he called, or I transfer him to the person he's trying to reach. I escalated it to my supervisor, who tells him the same thing. Repeat the process a couple more times. My boss finally is able to get enough information out of him to figure out who he was actually trying to call, and gives the man the right number. The whole ordeal lasted at least 30 minutes. It was awful. Getting yelled at by a senile old man for half an hour is not my idea of fun. Before I moved to Las Vegas, I was a casino manager at a casino in Iowa. It's important to note that I was 23 when I was promoted to this position, which in itself is uncommon for someone so young to be a casino manager, not to mention the fact that I looked like I was 18 at the time. Because of this, it would happen fairly often that I would be called out to deal with a situation, and people wouldn't believe that I was the casino manager. Now to this particular story. A guest was playing a table game called High Card Flush, which is a poker derivative game, where the goal is for the player to receive a higher flush than the dealer does. The better the player's hand is, the better odds they receive on any bonus bets they may have placed, with the highest payout being 8,000 to 1. This particular guest hit a hand that paid his wager 300 to 1. Now, in table games any bet that has payout odds of 300 to 1 or greater and pays a total of more than $600 is subject to state and federal income tax. Different casinos in different states process this differently, so there are different procedures as to how this is done. I just so happened to be standing right behind the table when this situation occurred, so I was able to start the paperwork immediately. This process can take anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes depending on the situation. Recording the player's tax information, surveillance confirming the outcome of the hand, etc. Since I was right there, this particular instance only took 18 minutes. However, the whole time we were processing this payout, the customer wouldn't stop complaining about how long it was taking. He was giving us the usual "in Vegas it doesn't take this long. In Vegas they just pay me with chips right off the table." I explained to him multiple times that we were not in Las Vegas and that we had different procedures. Now my boss, who had very little to do with the day-to-day operations of the casino, just so happened to be standing nearby while all this was happening and was just watching. Eventually we paid the guest, and he was still complaining about how long it took to get his money and asked to speak to the casino manager. I explained to him that I was the casino manager and any complaints could be directed towards me. He flat out refused to believe me due to my age and demanded that I call the real manager. This whole time my boss was just watching, kind of laughing to himself at the ridiculousness of the situation. So I turned to the pit boss and asked him to call the mod phone while I waited with the guest. The pit boss looked at me for a second and I said, "Just call the manager phone and tell him what's going on." The customer had a very smug look on his face, and I continued to talk to him about the situation. Well, right about then, my phone rings, so I excuse myself to answer it, and take exactly one step back from the customer, while still facing him. I then proceeded to have this one-sided phone conversation, while the pit boss just stood there with the phone to his ear. This is antitheistic 10. Well, what is his complaint? Tell him there's nothing we can do about how long it takes to pay him. We have to go through very specific procedures. Well, did you tell him he's not in Las Vegas? And he still won't listen to you? At this point the guest realized what was going on and attempted to interrupt me, which I shut down by putting my finger up and mouthing I'm on the phone and turning away from him. Okay, well, I'll be right there to talk to him. I hung up the phone, turned around and reintroduced myself as the manager and asked how I could help. I was expecting him to start yelling and cussing or to leave in anger, but he was just dumbstruck. Couldn't say a word. I explained to him again our process for paying taxable winnings, and he just sat back down in his chair and continued playing. I looked over and my boss was red in the face from holding back his laughter. I had to be the manager of our shop recently after another worker's client cancelled his job the day after he purchased, moved, and cleaned £5,000 of steel into our shop. The woman who cancelled his job demanded that he return all the metal for a full refund. He said that the company he bought it from charged a 20% restocking fee, and she flipped out, accusing him of lying about it and about our shop's rental fees, threatening to not pay him for his 20 hours of work he had already done. He popped in some headphones during the call and gave me one so I could listen to her berate him and threaten him, saying she was going to get him fired / sue him etc. Then he gave her my number so she could talk to the manager, and she called me acting all sugary sweet and trying to flirt her way out of paying our shop fees. This dragged on into sob stories and eventually the same beachy refusal she had given my friend. I had the great pleasure of telling her that I didn't give a fuck who she was. This was business, and if she wanted to waste my time trying to talk her way out of the money she owed me, I would simply keep her $3,000 of steel as compensation. She then told me that it wasn't her money, so my threat was hollow, to which I replied, okay, let me speak to your manager. Then 30 cents later a very nice man on the phone apologized profusely and assured me that she would be there in the morning with the payment for my shop and my friend's labor. Obligatory, not a manager. I'm an experienced employee working for one of the US's retail giants. I was helping, at least trying to anyway, an older woman who wanted a new remote control for her TV. She tells me the brand, and so I look it up with a store PDA. It showed that even our online store did not carry this particular brand, and the stores only carry universal remote controls. So, I relay this information to her. She wasn't having it. She insisted that she had searched on Google for where the remote was sold and claimed Google gave a search result saying our store carries it. So, I oblige her and use the PDA to do a Google search. Our store came up, but not for the brand of the remote she wanted. Again, only universal remotes at this point. She starts saying I must be incapable of finding it, and I have no idea what I'm doing. She demands a manager. I grab my walkie-talkie and call the manager, who asks me to explain the situation. While I attempt to explain and gently ask her to please come over, the woman attempts to take the walkie from me to yell over it. Now, I do not tolerate this sort of action and kept a very tight grip and angrily stared her down for even attempting to do that, which only angered her further. Eventually, my manager comes over, with her yelling at me for being controlling, inexperienced, and terrible at customer service. My manager tells her exactly what I told her, and she leaves in a huff, after yelling that I'm awful and shouldn't work there. I'm just thankful my manager is one of the sweetest people in the world, and she knows I will pull out all stops to deliver great service, and I'm known for going the extra mile regularly, even for unpleasant customers. She let me go to my lunch break early, so I could cool off. Not a manager, but was pretty close to mine. I used to work at Best Buy as a backroom associate. My job was basically to take the shipments we got, push them onto the floor, send back faulty stuff, etc. There were times when people asked me to explain stuff or help them. I usually did, unless I was behind or busy, but it was exhausting, since I worked 3 jobs for 3 days a week for half a month. In the morning I would work at Big Lots from 3 to 9 AM stocking. Then I would head over to a work at a summer camp till 3 PM, then work till 10 at Best Buy. I'd be at the end of my shift slamming monsters in 5-hour energies, like they were running out of stock. I eventually even got them for free while working there, just so I could even function. Point anyways, I'm stocking the MP3 aisle with earbuds and headphones whilst chugging a monster, and this Indian man comes up to me and asks me to help him. He points to this all-tech speaker we have in a fancy 3D display and asks about it. I start explaining the speaker and he says, no, I want to know about this, and starts touching the display. I say I don't understand, and he says he wants to know about the display. I'm too exhausted to care and about to ask why he was wasting my faking time. Instead I say I really don't know, maybe something with a glass and a projector. This dude about loses it. People are basically looking and side-eyeing this fully grown Indian man screaming at a barely functioning teenager holding Beats headphones and an energy drink, demanding a manager. So I yawn, take another sip of my drink, and radio in for the manager. Manager comes and asks what's going on. Dude starts hollering about why I can't explain the display to him, and how I'm being an asshole for being tired. Manager simply tells him I've been working 3 jobs, have been up since 3, still has another few hours on my shift left, and if he was just going to scream at he could get the fuck out of the store. Point I got the rest of the day off and happily slept for over 10 hours. I once had a couple come in and waste a lot of my time complaining because I saved them around $600 on their wireless bill. Point I work for a major phone carrier and we often have decent promotions for new customers. At the time, we were offering something like switch to XXX and get $300 per phone if you trade in your old device. I talk the customers into switching to our service, trade in their shitty Walmart phones, and managed to get them a huge chunk of change off their phone bill. They had the option of a bill credit or gift card. Somehow, instead of getting 2 gift cards like they wanted, they end up with 2 $300 bill credits. Well, this pissed them off. They came back screaming for a manager to assist them because they absolutely had to have those gift cards that couldn't be used anywhere but our online store and for bill payments. When I politely asked why it had to be gift cards, they said it was to pay for accessories they billed / were going to bill to their account. I spent a good bit of time explaining that either way, the accessories are paid for, and if for some reason the credits didn't cover the accessories, the money they are saving on the service could go towards the accessories. It was something to that effect. Point that wasn't good enough for them. They called our customer service in front of me to complain, and the lady on the phone couldn't even take the couple seriously. She told me they were nuts. Eventually, the manager above me heard the conversation as it continued to escalate and told them, not at all pleasantly, that they were being ridiculous and ungrateful. They eventually left, but definitely not after causing a bit of a scene. We were convinced they wanted to sell the gift cards for drugs and not even bother with the service. So when they didn't get the gift cards, they panicked and thought they could yell their way to victory. Not once did it cross their minds that they would look like idiots yelling at someone who basically gave them a shit ton of money. There was nothing we could do for them at that point. Anyway, once credits are issued there's no going back. I hope they eventually got their heroin, or that the heroin got them. Worked at a place where you could get a supposedly Best Buy. While I have numerous stories from my time there, I will divulge the one that stuck out the most. I had recently acquired employment elsewhere, but decided to stay on, since my new job was also in it. I was not allowed to stay in squad of geeks. To customer service with 0 facts to give I went. On one particular evening a lady with husband trolling behind her come up to the counter looking to return a digital camera, of which this store has a well-known 14-day return policy. A few things stand out right from the get-go. This couple is very tan and living in the Midwest during the late fall. That's hard to come by. Also the box the camera was in was a bit worn, and holy shit, where they way past the 14-day period, were even outside of 30 days. Pretty much gathered they used the camera for vacation, were slow on getting the pictures transferred, and now were looking for their money back. I calmly explained that the return policy is 14 days on cameras and there is a restocking fee, but being they were outside of said policy I couldn't return it. She tells me that's not acceptable, and where does it say that? I calmly tell her that not only does it say it on the receipt, but also the giant blue faking sign that is literally 10 feet to your right. Well, fuck me running. If she didn't like that answer, the "all I want to speak to your manager" was the next seething line escaping her mouth. To which I immediately did a 360-degree spin, and with a smile spread across my face asked how I can help her. It was at that point I discovered humans can change to a shade of red I didn't think possible. She then asks if there was anyone that had more power than I in the store. I explained the GM does, and she asked me to get said grams. I went and found the GM, oddly enough, in the camera department, and explained the situation. She went and handled it, the lady leaving the store not getting what she wanted. GM came back, and I could tell she was trying not to laugh, while asking if I really said what I did. I told her yes, to which she simply replied not to do it again. Good times. I work at a restaurant that partners with a third-party delivery service, so our guests can get the food delivered. An upset lady calls the other day because her delivery order was messed up. I took the call and asked for the name attached to the order. The name was not any of the names attached to the 9 delivery orders we've done that day. I ask her what items were on the check, and it doesn't match either. At this point I tell her that we didn't make her order, so she needs to contact the delivery company and they should be able to help her either get replacement food or a refund from whatever store the order did come from. She says okay and hangs up. Then she calls back like 2 minutes later and tells me that she lives in the same city, so it had to be my restaurant and not another location. I told her that we didn't have her info, so she needed to contact the delivery company. She then rudely says I'll give you my info. I stopped her and again told her that the order didn't come from my location. She asks me how that's possible cause she is in this city, and I tell her calmly that I don't know how the delivery company chooses which location to order from. She hangs up again. About 2 minutes later she calls back again and tells me that she is going to stop payment on her card and fight the charges if I don't help her. I tell her still calmly that I urge her to contact the delivery company first, but she was welcome to do so. She flat out tells me that she won't contact them and that she is going to fight the charges and never return before hanging up on me. TLDR, guest calls incorrect location demanding fix and ends up trying to stop credit card payment rather than contact correct people. 3 years after I graduated, I found a great job, was paid well. My friend called me to help with his restaurant since one of the waiters called in sick. I worked there during college. During lunch service, the kitchen got confused with part of an order. Of 11 entrees, 10 came out perfectly fine. There was a mix-up with the 11th, and we were absolutely swamped. I had entertained the entire family with the 11th order, really reconnected with my waiter charisma, was prompt with everything, and bought as much time for the kitchen as I could. However, this one was out of my control. The kitchen staff wasn't able to come up with the dish after 10 minutes, and an older man, in about his 50s-60s, got into my face and screamed that I had ruined the meal and demanded to see a manager. As his spit was flying everywhere, I apologized profusely as he jammed his stubby finger into my chest telling me that I was incompetent, and it was no wonder that I didn't have a real job. While I'm not particularly large, I had a good 6 inches on this man, and it still surprises me that I stopped myself from grabbing his face and crushing it against the floor. My friend, manager/owner, shows up and gave them the final entree for free. They thanked him and told him that I needed to be replaced. I was rewarded with a tip of $0. No justice born here. TLDR, kitchen got confused with an order. Older man got into my face. Never in my life did I want to throw someone's face into the ground so bad. My time has come. I worked at a Taco Bell for almost 4.5 years, 4 of those as a manager. I can literally spend an hour or two telling stories. Here are the best hits, in order of when they happened. Preface: I'm 5 feet 4 inches, 150, speak softly, and wear colorful makeup. I'm not an intimidating person. This was also a very small store, one of the half gas station, half restaurant deals. Story 1 TLDR, angry customer wants more for free and doesn't get it because why reward bad behavior? Not too long after I started managing, we had this lady come in. She was notorious, and I had been warned about getting her order right. She orders, and we put our best into this order, making it very carefully. Slow evening, only order on the screen. It was alright. I was the person who handed it out. She had ordered 3 small side cups of nacho cheese. They were clear and in the top of the bag. So she checks the bag, picks one up, and shakes it in my face. Does this look like it's full? Ma'am, that's all we can put in those cups. Which was true. They were big enough to fit 2 pumps of nacho cheese, which left mile of a quarter-inch or so empty. I want more than this. I paid for these, ma'am. That's all we are allowed to give you, and that's all. This is outrageous. I want to speak to the manager. I am the manager on duty, ma'am. I demand you give me more cheese, ma'am. We are only allowed to give you as much as is in that cup. We are not supposed to give you more. A full pump of nacho cheese wouldn't even fit. It would run over the edges and go to waste. This lady spent 10 minutes screaming at me over 0.07 cents worth of nacho cheese. If she'd been a little nicer initially, she might have gotten it. As it is, I told her no, until she got angry enough to order another side. There's no reason to reward bad behavior. The entire time I'm waiting on the table people to make her side, she's shouting about how awful I am. She's calling corporate, etc. As I handed her side to her, my father came in. She grabbed her bag, turned, and screamed at him, "I bet she fills up your nacho cheese cups," and stomped away. Dad laughed pretty hard. I told him the story and he laughed harder. Story 2 TLDR. Call-in order results in screaming and name dropping. We accepted call-in orders. Call-in order, come pick it up, saved us the screaming and hassle of $70 orders in the drive-thru during rush. Mostly point one evening, I was working with new people. Me, a manager of about a year, with 3 people who had been there less than a month. They weren't doing badly, but they were still new. And we got very busy. A lady calls around 5 o'clock and orders. I end up taking it, since the only cashier is swamped, and nobody else knows how to take call-in orders. I wrote it down, and she asked for an estimate. I wasn't on registers, and they were being used, plus running to the front to dawdle in full sight of customers is asking for trouble. I estimated it wouldn't be any more than $25. Place the order online and start making food. An hour later, around 6, the drive-thru dings. Yeah, I had a call in under HRGLBLRGH. We start making it, but this is a small store. It's very busy. We have 3 people and 1 line open. By the time they got to the window, they'd been sitting for 18 minutes. It's a horrendous wait, I know, but we are literally slinging food as fast as we can go. Shortly after they leave, the phone rings. It's the original lady. I'm missing a side of sour cream. And it took you an hour and a half to make my food. This is unbelievably awful service. I'm on the line, making food as fast as I can. Phone between my ear and shoulder. I'm sorry about that, ma'am. If you want you can come back and pick it up. Oh, can. Are you going to pay me for my gas money? Or watch my children while I come get it? If you can't come and get it now, I can write your name down, and next time you come in, we can give. What's that going to do? Is it going to fix my ruined supper? Is that going to make my children feel better about the quesadilla they can't eat? You're being rude. I'm actually, physically, biting my tongue. I'm sorry if I sounded rude, ma'am. I'm just trying to find a solution that works for you. No, you're not. This is the most awful service I have ever had. You are an awful manager. I worked in management for 17 years and people with your attitude should be fired. I'm telling coworker 1 and coworker 2. I'm calling corporate. You're going to get fired. Click. She hung up on me. No justice there. Just me grinding my teeth for the rest of the night. I told 1 and 2 about it myself and they laughed. They weren't even managers. This lady was just name dropping to try and scare me. And we had only a fraction of her wait time. That was our fault. Maybe your friend who picked it up should have left sooner. Story 3 TLDR. Probably a scammer tried to scam some tacos and didn't get them. Saturday night, around 9 or so. By this time, I was the assistant manager. I was taking my break in the back office when the cashier came and got me, saying there was someone up front who needed a manager. Hi, sir, what can I do for you? I Came through the drive-thru this morning and ordered 4 soft tacos with just meat, cheese, and sour cream. They had lettuce and tomatoes on them. I called and they said I could come back and get them. Okay, sir, what's your name? I need to check the manager's book. I don't remember it, so he'll be a Chad. I check the book. No Chad. I called the general manager, who had opened that morning, and asked her if anyone had called back with something like that. Nope. There's one boy working, and he was doing dishes in the back. This guy had hit my radar as a little odd, so I asked the boy to just come up front and be there as a witness. He comes up and leans on the line, just within earshot, while I talk to Chad. I'm sorry, sir, your name isn't in the book. Do you have a receipt, or maybe a mobile banking app, so you can show me the charge from this morning? I just need proof of purchase. What? No, I don't have the receipt. Call the manager and ask her. I already did, sir, and she says she didn't get any calls about wrong orders today. What? So you're not going to give me my food? I'm sorry, sir, I can't give you anything without proof of purchase. Like I said, if you have a receipt, or if you can show me the charge to your account, I can replace your order. This is bullshit. Then he started ranting about how he had no money, and he didn't even have enough gas to get back to that, and this was awful, and I was awful, and it was bad management. He told me to call the GM. I told him I already had, and that she was the manager who worked that morning. He storms out to look for his receipt, and comes back a minute later, empty-handed. I repeated the same line about proof of purchase. He rants some more about how I'm starving his kids and they're in the car hungry, and etc. After he was done with that, he leaned on the counter, looked at me, and said, I guess I'd get in trouble if I started tearing shit up. Huh, yes, sir. He turns and starts sauntering out. I skitter away from the counter and over next to the other worker, who makes a remark under his breath. It was so quiet, I couldn't even hear it. This guy turns around, leaps to the counter, and bellows, "What did you say?" I wasn't expecting that, so I stammered, It was nothing, sir. He was just telling a joke." "A joke, huh? You laughing at me? You think this is funny, boy? Bet you won't think it's funny in a minute. Come on out to the parking lot, boy, I'll whip your ass." I really thought he'd jump the counter, but after that outburst, he stared for a minute and left point and called back the next night. If anyone wants me to recount that call, I will, but it was more of the same. Obligatory, not a manager. Was merely a 16-year-old fast food employee who happened to be at the cash registers ordering food on my break at McDonald's. We had a buy one get one free Big Mac promotion going on. It was insanely popular and the restaurant ran out of Big Mac sauce. This gentleman walks into the restaurant and orders 2 Big Macs. The cashier was friendly and said, "I can put these in for you, but just want to let you know that we don't have the Big Mac sauce for them." Gentleman asks her to repeat, so she repeats. He is baffled by how somebody can sell Big Macs without Big Mac sauce and makes the argument, "How can you sell a Big Mac without the sauce?" The cashier and gentleman go back and forth repeating their stances 5 or 6 times, with the gentleman getting more irate and aggressive with each repeat. At this point the nearby manager pulls the gentleman aside to reason with him. The manager and gentleman then repeat the same stances another 5 or 6 times until the guy is straight up screaming at the manager. When that didn't work, he switches his stance to, "You're just not serving me because I'm black." After a few unsuccessful go-abouts with this argument, he rips off his shirt to show a patch of medical gauze on his chest, completely invisible with his shirt on, and switches his argument to, "You're just not serving me because I'm handicapped." Thankfully that argument didn't last too long, and he left in a huff. I work retail in a sports store. An older woman came by our store early in the morning and asked us about exchanging sizes for a pair of shoes she had purchased months before. Now we have a pretty weird return policy. Even if you lose the receipt, you'll receive store credit, no matter what. No matter how long ago you made the purchase. We are told to just do it for them and not really ask questions. Customer satisfaction guaranteed, etc. In this scenario, she wanted the exchange. Turns out we no longer carry the shoe she asked for. It happens. This made her pretty upset. She then starts blaming the shoe for its poor quality. This called for me to bring my manager out, so we can both explain the situation. After bringing out my manager, we both try to explain why we can't do it, and how the shoe she was bashing was actually a very nice shoe. This led me to giggle a bit, because she kept insisting it wasn't her son's fault for obliterating the shoe. Totally was $160 shoe. She then looked at my manager and said, "What's he laughing about? That's so funny." I apologized for laughing and again tried convincing her that her son might have been a little rough on them. She freaked out, threw her hands in my face saying I have no idea what I'm talking about, how I should be fired and never allowed to work anywhere else. Luckily, my district manager was there to defuse the situation. Needless to say, she felt dumb hearing it from the higher up. Retail's a beach, man.